I'm David Haynes. I'm the opinions editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Welcome to Fourth and State. I'm joined today by Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican, who is our senior senator. He's also a member of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate. We're going to talk a bit about foreign policy. Senator Johnson, welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here. I wonder if you could talk first about the president's decision to take on the Islamic State. Do you support that decision? Do you think it came soon enough?
Let's first say that President Obama didn't decide to go to war with ISIS. Islamic terror decided to go to war with America a couple decades ago. So unfortunately, President Obama has to deal with a very complex, very difficult situation, but I totally agree with the goal he set. And when you take a look at the evil, the barbarity of what ISIS represents, I mean the beheadings, the crucifixions, the mass executions, and what they do to women it's just unspeakable. So these aren't people you can negotiate with, and that's something President Obama acknowledged in his UN speech. They're a force that will only respond to force, and they have to be defeated. So I agree that he set that goal of degrade and ultimately defeating ISIS, and I'm afraid we've got to leave every option on the table to accomplish that goal.
Do you think the president has any responsibility at all, I think you've said this in the past, for the rise of the Islamic State? Were there any things that we could have done, either in Syria or Iraq, that have done different?
The real blame rests with the evil barbarians that are members of ISIS. But had we done, after when President Obama came into office, had we left a stabilizing force behind in Iraq? I mean, our military was basically the glue that held that coalition government together. The Shia government needed our troops to protect themselves from people they didn't trust, the Sunnis. The Sunnis needed our troops to protect themselves against people they didn't trust, the Shia. And when we left, when we just bugged out of Iraq, that trust was immediately dissolved, and you see the results of that dissolution of that trust. So, yeah, it was unfortunate that we didn't leave that stabilizing force. I don't think Iraq would have split up. I think we needed to give the Sunnis and the Shia the time and the space to have that coalition actually develop into the type of trust where a true coalition government could have existed without our presence. But we didn't do that, and now we're having to deal with the situation, and so we have to deal with that reality.
But the administration has argued that they tried to get a status of forces agreement in place, and that the Maliki government wasn't willing to give them what they needed legally to protect our troops.
Well, as I've talked to people who were involved in those negotiations or know people who were, what I've been told actually happened is, our generals were asking for somewhere between 20 and 24,000 troops as a stabilizing force, which was acceptable to Maliki. Again, he wanted a stabilizing force to protect himself against people he didn't trust, the Sunnis. And as we, during those negotiations, continued to ramp down the number of troops that we were going to leave, it got to a number that was so low that Maliki did not believe that was going to be sufficient to protect himself against the Sunni, and he at the last minute, just to save face, said, well, our parliament's going to have to ratify this, and we can't guarantee immunity for your troops. And it was kind of a face-saving measure. So, as the story's been described to me, Maliki wanted a long-term strategic partnership, felt status force agreement was just table stakes. We weren't willing to leave enough troops to make it possible for him to accept that agreement.
So you do think it's possible that the administration, President Obama, could have gotten a status of forces?
I think he absolutely could have gotten status force.
What about in Syria? That's been, the civil war there has been an absolute tragic mess now for at least 3 or 4 years since after the Arab Spring. There was a lot of hope there at the beginning. Was there ever an opportunity? And President Obama, a lot of people would say, to his credit, kept us out of Syria. What's your view on that?
I mean, 3 years ago, when the Arab Spring began, and that's really what happened, is more moderate elements wanted to overthrow Assad. There might have been an opportunity to support those more moderate elements to do just that. It's not very wise to basically declare as American president that a particular leader's got to go and then not provide support for the replacement regime. And I think that was probably if there was a mistake made, it was probably right there.
What do you think?
But again, this is incredibly complex.
Sure.
Well, I think what we would have had to do is,
How do you know who the moderates are?
Back then it was probably easier to define that, but as the situation is just degraded, most Americans don't realize more than 200,000 Syrians have been slaughtered by Assad now. I don't think anybody, looking at Assad prior to this, would have thought he'd been capable of that. I mean, I just think that's true. I mean, I think he was educated in the West. He's a dentist, supposedly more moderate than his father. I think we're all sitting here shocked at what Assad has done. So the situation in Syria is degraded to such a level. There are at least, in terms of major groups, there are at least 4 major groups. You got the Assad regime. You've got al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda affiliated. You have ISIS. You have the moderate rebels. Now you have Khorasan, which is another al-Qaeda group. You've got Hezbollah. And then within the moderate groups, there are literally 1,000 or more individual groups. Some of these are a band of 12 people. Who's leading them? It's incredibly complex.
So is there anything else we can do now in Syria? Do we need to have boots on the ground in order to defeat the Islamic State?
I'm pretty linear in my thought process. You got to deal with the reality we've got right now, and right now it's an ugly reality. Again, I agree with President Obama. His goal is to defeat ISIS, but it's going to start with degrading. So the first thing is you have to stop their advance. And the bombing strikes stop their advance. Working with the Kurdish Peshmerga and some of the effective members of effective forces in the Iraqi security forces, we've stopped their advance. But we may not have stopped it forever, so we've got to be on the lookout for that. Eventually, you have to start rolling them back. The next step would be roll them back, get them out of Iraq. But David, you have to realize the 2007 surge, we had about 100,000 Sunnis that were working with us.
Right.
We had about 100,000 Iraqi security forces.
The Sunni awakening.
We had 160,000 American troops on the ground, probably somewhere between 35 and 40,000 involved in direct combat in the clear and hold strategy to defeat 6,000 to 8,000 members of al-Qaeda in Iraq. Now we've got ISIS, which is better equipped, better resourced. They control territory. There's 31,000 to 40,000 of ISIS. I mean, are we going to be able to do it just training up 5,000 Syrian moderates?
Well, maybe not 5,000, but do we need American boots on the ground? Can it be our allies, Arab allies? Do you believe that's possible for our Arab allies to take that job on the ground with our help and support?
I'm not a military expert. I mean, if you're listening to the generals, I mean, so many of them are showing a great deal
that's what
doubt and skepticism.
President Obama's saying.
What I will say is the American president, having stated the goal of defeating ISIS, should not have taken any option off the table. Why signal that to your enemy? I hope his strategy would work. I'm doubtful myself whether that will work. And let's face it, David, we already have boots on the ground. And it's a matter of semantics in terms of exactly what they're doing.
Advisors and so forth.
In the end, I support President Obama's goal. We have to defeat ISIS. We're going to have to do what it takes to accomplish that goal.
One final question on Ukraine. What do you think of U.S. policy as it relates to Ukraine at this point? Is there anything else that we ought to be doing?
Yeah, we should have been doing something. As soon as Prime Minister Yatsenyuk came to America, and that's right around the whole vote around Crimea, and just requested something pretty small. Can you give us some small arms and ammunition? Not that would have turned the tide of the war. It would have sent a very strong signal to Vladimir Putin. Maybe started to change his calculus. But we haven't done that. And when President Poroshenko came the week before we adjourned, or went on recess, and gave a powerful, historic speech, said, listen, we're going to be there. Ukrainians are courageous. They're losing their lives for their country, for freedom, for democracy. But we need help. We can't defeat Putin with blankets. And that's basically, we've given them blankets, some sleeping mats, some meals ready to eat. They need defensive lethal weaponry. We should be giving them anti-tank rounds. We need to change Vladimir Putin's calculus. I think we were all pleasantly surprised of the courage, not surprised by the courage, but the fact they were effective. The Ukrainian troops, they were getting control of the situation. They were securing the border. Vladimir Putin wouldn't allow them to do that, so that's when he rolled his tanks and his Russian military in. We should have already been supplying Ukrainians with the anti-tank weaponry to change Vladimir Putin's calculus. I can't say for sure he wouldn't have rolled his tanks in, but he would have had to realize it would have been a far bloodier proposition for him to do so. So, Vladimir Putin's not looking for off-ramps. He's looking for on-ramps. And unless we're willing to show him that we will support Ukraine militarily with the kind of lethal weaponry that will make his calculus, change his calculus, make any kind of move, aggressive military move into Ukraine far more costly, I'm afraid Vladimir Putin's just going to sit there and take advantage of the situation.
Isn't there a risk for the U.S. in that strategy, though, of getting more deeply involved militarily?
No, I mean, the Ukrainian people are courageous. They want to defend their nation. They want to maintain the border integrity. They'll fight. You know, nobody's asking for boots on the ground in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. They just want the tools, the weaponry, because the former regime, in kind of the puppet regime out of Vladimir Putin that was in Ukraine, they totally hollowed out their military. Mm-hmm. But that's why I say we've all been very pleasantly surprised that the military has been as effective as it's been fighting that separatist movement that's been totally supported by Russia. So we need to give them that support. It's got to be visible. It's got to be overt to change Vladimir Putin's calculus. We haven't done that yet.
Well, Senator Johnson, thanks for being with us on Fourth and State.
Thank you.